Greetings, dear women. I'm Kryon of Magnetic Service. My partner moves away. There is great history that is spiritual, that is represented by the idea of this which you call the Lemurian sisterhood. Through time and 30 channels or more, we have slowly presented the concepts of what you were part of. We speak now to all who listen who are female. And we say to you this, that in this shift, in this magic time, the end of this precession of the equinoxes, your gender is no error. And that it is the way things have settled and the way the plan has been that all participants of the original sisterhood over the many years are today alive again as women. And that is so that they can feel, perhaps sense, this history that we speak of. That there was a time when the women held the banner, the torch of shamanship, and that it was natural, and that the men needed it and expected it and turned to the women for this kind of advice and help. This has been the premise all along. Indeed, you were not necessarily together doing a sisterhood. Indeed, it is scattered over many years, many lifetimes. But it doesn't matter, because the seeds of your Akash experienced it, and the seeds of your Akash are what you're talking about now. It brings you together. Does it matter how many lifetimes it was, or whether you did it together or not? There is a togetherness now. That is the sisterhood. Something that all of you have experienced at one time. The questions have always been, how do you apply it to now? What does it mean? And we have covered some of those things. We've even said the last time you were together, look for a void of things that are not being done. That there are voids. And that there are places where you can instill that which was before. And you don't have to rewrite anything that's happening now to do it. But I want to present something right now that is for Meliha. It's also for those women who are here. If I could take you back to the big place that you called Lemuria, the small continent, the mountain of Hawaii, when it was out of the water, when it pushed up past 30,000 feet. Nobody has ever asked where was the sisterhood. It was a big place. And the answer is that there were sisterhoods everywhere. You lived at the ocean. This is where the fishing was. This is where the towns and the villages were. This is where the teaching took place. This is where it wasn't cold. And so there were sisterhoods everywhere. Did you ever think that it was a collective, and that is to say there may have been 40 or 50 sisterhoods going at the same time, all over the islands? Now, there was only one central mountain. There were no islands, per se. That came as the sinking began. And so you must think of it differently than you do today, that there were islands. But there were so many sisterhoods because there were so many villages. Melly Haw's task, part of it, was traveling from sisterhood to sisterhood. But there is something that took place, and I want to tell you what it was. And I want to give you some instructions, Melly Ha, that you have a year to put this together. There was a way on their new year that they all did something together. The calendar was different then. But as the seasons progressed, there was a new year. They didn't call it a new year. It was a new energy. It was a beginning. And every single time it was renewed, the sisterhood presented itself all over this little continent. And they did something together. And you might ask, well, how did they do something together when there was no clocks? When there was no time reference? And there is, and there always has been. And in the case of Lemuria, it was the tides. Each sisterhood had a marker that after the sun went down and after a certain time, when the tide was a certain place, the marker was put and a string was tied to it in the water. And when the water covered it, even slightly, they all had the same message at the same time. And they would begin a service, a celebration. And what a celebration it was. The women, each one in the circle, would tell about what happened that year that was beautiful. They talked about the birth of their children. They reviewed those who passed away. And they would talk about the celebration of the life of the one who was no longer with them. In all that they did, even if some of them had disease, they would talk about the challenges that they had gotten through and help each other. They would name the names of the ones who came to them and helped them and bathed them and touched their head. There were no complaints. For the teachers that the Lemurians had, the original teachers taught them about consciousness, not about affirmations. That's a little progressive for them. But how positive things create positive things. About how the ocean itself is listening to them. About how the mountains and the air is part of their lives. And as they speak into the air positive things, they get back positive things. The celebration was a New Year celebration. It was done as close as they could on the evening before the new season began. The new set of seasons began. Called something completely different than you call it now. And at a different time. All of them coordinated. All over this place you called Lemuria. And they all knew they were doing it at the same time. Melly Ha would supervise over a central one, which was her home. But she knew also, not only were all of them doing it at the same time, they were singing the same songs. They were giving the same messages, the same celebration. And for once a year, they were allied together as one. I want you to do that. It's tough because there's nothing been planned for this year. But within a year there will be. And now you have the technology to come together all over the planet as one giant sisterhood, to design it so you're doing the same thing, where nothing negative is spoken, no matter what, where you can reflect on the year and celebrate the things that need celebrations, look at the challenges as something that you got through, that strengthen you for the next time it takes place. The togetherness of this one ceremony set the stage for all the villages for the whole next year. And yes, men were there. They sat in the back. Because they got to hear once a year what the women had to say. And they felt the beauty of the spirituality, of the rejoicing, of the sacredness. As they sat there with the torches burning in silence, respecting that which they knew the women did for them. Because the women knew how somehow to touch the face of spirit, to communicate with the Creator. The one that told them how to fish and where, to beware of the storms and when they were coming. And the women had saved countless lives by their intuition. Once a year, something special happened all together, and everyone attended. You have a year, Meliha, if you wish this to be. Not that difficult with today's technology, but what an event it will be. The sisterhood is big and will get bigger. And what it is and what it represents is the love of women in communication with women and also the creative source. It is beautiful. I want you to conjure up a vision right now of what it would be like when the sun went down, the torches were lit, the breezes were blowing, and you began. And the women around the circle, in a loud voice so all could hear, started celebrating what had happened that year for them. Reviewing the year and talking about those who had passed in such a positive way. Everyone looked forward to this. It was the highlight and event. And I bring it up right now because this, well, it's the last channel, perhaps the last sisterhood of the year. And perhaps this will be the last year where there is no collective ceremony. Think about these things, what they meant then, what they could mean now. As the sisterhood starts to graduate into something larger, not larger in numbers, but larger in energy and purpose. Thank you, Meliha, for what you're doing for the planet. And so it is.